welcome to Crime and Court. My name is Heather, and we are reading through the 3-day hearing, the transcript for the 3-day hearing that they had in Delphi, for the Delphi case, I should say, rather, with the motion to suppress. So this is Indiana versus Richard Allen. This is part two of the motion to suppress. We're going to continue reading through the 3-day hearing transcript. So, that being said, last time we read through, oh gosh, let me pull up my thing here. We read through Harshman and Holman's testimony. So now we are going to read through John Gallipo's testimony. He is the warden. Harshman is the one who, remember, he went through all the communications of Richard Allen, and Holman, obviously, lead detective, he's going to be testifying each day of this 3-day hearing. We are on the second day of the hearing, FYI. All right, so let's begin. Please hit that like button. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry, my dog's walking up the stairs. Well, we have hardwood floors. They're so loud. Nails on the floor. I can't stand it. It's like one of my pet peeves. Anyway, so testimony of Warden John Gallipo, motion to suppress, July 31st. And please hit the like button and let's begin. All right, so let me skip down here. We have, for the state of Indiana, we have Nicholas C. McLeland. He is the district attorney. Then we have James Luttrell and Stacy Diener, also from the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office. Hold on, I gotta keep an ear out for my dog because she's sunbathing. She's special. All right, and for the defendant, we have Bradley Rosie, Andrew Baldwin, and Jennifer Auger is the way that I'm hearing people pronounce it. I've been saying Auger this whole time, so I'm probably wrong, but whatever. Let's move on. So, all right, so Judge Gall is also present, and Jody Williams is the reporter. We're going to begin with the direct examination of Warden John Gallipo, and Attorney Rosie is calling John Gallipo to the stand. This is direct examination, and Rosie's doing the questioning. Question: What's your name? Answer: John Gallipo. And we've met before, right, Warden? Correct. 3 or 4 times now, I think, right? Correct. And tell the judge where you work. Currently, I work at LaPorte Juvenile Correctional Facility. Okay, and how long have you been in what capacity are you employed in LaPorte? I'm the warden at LaPorte Juvenile. All right, and how long have you been with the DOC? Approximately 28 years. FYI, if you look at the thumbnail, don't mean to interrupt, but John Gallipo is the bald guy that you see in the middle between Nick McLeland and Richard Allen, and his attorneys are the people that we heard from. So Harshman was the one in the sheriff's hat. Um, Holman is the one with the like army buzz cut, and then in front of them is John Gallipo. So that is just for our visual learners. That's who we're talking to. All right. So he's been in charge or a warden he's been with the DOC, let's say, for 28 years. And Rosie says, okay. The sound is we're getting like that. And the court reporter says, if he can move the microphone away, witness away. Oh, yes, move the microphone away. Okay. So we had some volume issues. I'm going to make sure you guys can hear me too. All right. So, question. Warden, the court says, yeah, and I think if you just speak up loud, it will capture you. He said, Rosie says, we're still experimenting with a new system here, so bear with us. And John Gallipo says, I will. Question is, you said you've been with the DOC for about 28 years? Correct. And you were the warden at Westville? Is that correct? And Westville Correctional is where Richard Allen was, or he was transferred to for safekeeping. originally. This is his like first transfer from county. That's where they sent him. John Galpo says correct. Question: and how long were you the warden at Westville? Approximately 5 years. And when was it that you left Westville and went to your current position? I believe I started at LaPorte beginning of February, so 8 months roughly. And you suggested to me previously, did you not, that you basically had a lateral, I think that was the way you defended it, a lateral transfer, or defined it, sorry, a reassignment. Okay, you went from supervising, is it fair to say, you went from supervising about 2,300 inmates down to 60? About 2,800 inmates to right around 55. So 2,800 adult felons at Westville, roughly. Correct. And now you're supervising 60 teenage females in the port, right? Currently 54. Yes. 54. Thank you. And you recall me taking your deposition back on March 22nd of 2024? I do. You took an oath at that time to tell the truth. Is that right? Correct. And you did that, right? Correct. I asked you, do you recall me asking you questions about Mr. Allen's safekeeping order and generally how familiar you were with those circumstances? Correct. Did you tell me that you were not aware of any circumstances in the time that you had been with the DOC where someone in his situation had been confined on a solitary basis? Confined on a solitary basis, we have 255 on a solitary basis. It was the first safekeeper, I said, that I've had. Yes, yes. So you told me that this is the first time you've even been in a situation involving a safekeeper in Richard Allen's circumstances. Yes, this is the first one I've been involved with. In 28 years? Correct. And one of your responsibilities, is it fair to say that one of your responsibilities as the warden is to manage the custodial staff and the inmates at the prison? That's correct, yes. And that would include having knowledge of what kind of offenders are being housed there, safekeepers, those types of things. Basic knowledge, yes. And do you agree that Mr. Allen was held at your facility in Westville for the better part of a year? Yes, I would concede to that, maybe a little longer. I'm just kind of estimating here, but basically November of 2022 through December of 2023. Does that sound right? Sounds about right, yes. And is it true that during that time that he was either on constant watch or on close supervision? Or neither, correct? Excuse me, cough, cough. All right. All right. So there were times that he was on neither of those. Yes, there were times where he was off mental health orders. Okay. All together? Correct. Okay. Do you agree that during Mr. Allen's detention at your facility that he was afforded very little privacy? He was afforded very little privacy. Yes, I would concede to that. It would be reasonable to say that he had no privacy. Is that correct? At time periods. Are you kidding me? You had a camera on him the entire time, so he never had any privacy. No matter where he went, no matter what he did. In his cell, like 24/7, constant monitoring on video, and then anytime he was transferred or moved from his cell, they video recorded that too. So, they had absolutely no privacy. Question. Well, okay, just start at the obvious. His cell, if I recall, you said it was about an 8.5 by 12.5 foot cell. Is that right? Correct. And that cell, is it accurate to say it was contained in a maximum security unit within the penitentiary itself? That is correct. If I say it was in a prison within a prison, is that a pretty nice way of describing the facility or WCU where he was housed? It's a fair description. Wow. So the warden even admits that it's a prison within a prison. Okay. Question: a lot of acronyms in this business, right? There is. But the WCU is the way you describe the unit where he was housed. Correct. Tell the judge what that acronym is. WCU or MCC, Maximum Control Complex. And what's W? What's the W? Where did that come from? Westville Control Unit. All right, Westville Control Unit. Correct. Thank you. And so that unit is a unit with inside the prison where basically you have to go through another set of fences and then into a confined unit to access Mr. Allen, right? That is correct. And is it true that during his entire stay at the facility that he had a video camera installed in his cell? That is correct. Okay, and that particular cell, well, you'll have to correct me. I think it was A107. That is correct. That cell, is it fair to say, is used for specific purposes? Yes. And one of those purposes is that it was used for monitoring people with self deletion ideations or offenders. That is true, he says. Is it also correct that the cell was situated in a unit where there are a number of other confinement cells? 55. And those are all very similar in terms of their characteristics, right? All the same except for the bed, yes. Same size, same, oh, I was going to say amenities. That's probably not the right word, but in general, same dimensions, same dimensions. Yep, okay. So it had the same dimensions. Okay, so basically, he's on a self deletion observation cell, but his neighbor right next door, a few feet away, is in a cell just like the one he's in. Correct. But he gets a camera. Is that accurate? That's correct. And that camera basically is focused on his cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes, sir. And that camera, is it accurate to say that that camera was recording his movements, activities, and everything that he did in the cell during those times? That is correct. And just to be clear, so the judge is aware, that camera, is it fair to say, did not have audio, it's just video? That is correct, no audio. And did you then instruct Ms. Maps, one of the employees of the prison, to preserve all of that video? Yes. And so that happened early on in Mr. Allen's stay that you instructed her to do that? I'm not sure when it happened, but yeah. What were your intentions of having her preserve all that video? Just for proceedings just like this. Okay. I don't think you need to monitor him with a camera 24/7 to be able to, report back if there are incidents. You don't have to take all of his privacy away to monitor him. Just so we could have, knowledge of be transparent. That's his reasons why. Purposes of litigation, right? Or just to be transparent. Yeah, to capture everything that may have happened. Okay, well, but they didn't record any conversations with potential suspects, or those recordings got recorded over. They don't have Richard Allen's uh a recording of his interrogation. So, well, it was an interview until they just up and decided that he was the perpetrator. Um he thought he was just helping them. So it's ugh, annoying. These guys like to lie and say the right things, but they're not doing the right things. All right. So, well, you say proceedings just like this. You're talking about us being here in a courtroom. This is one of them. Okay, correct. We were talking about privacy. Do you agree that even when Mr. Allen would use the restroom, that whether it would be a number one or a number two, so to speak, that he would be on video? Correct, it would be. Do you agree that there were lights on in his observation cell throughout his stay at Westville? Correct. And in fairness, there is a window in his cell, right? There was. Do you recall us talking about that in our deposition? Briefly. If I describe the window as kind of a window slit, if you will, is that a pretty good way of describing it? It is. So it's probably like real thin, like this much. You can see the outside, if he can even reach it. It is. I would describe it probably 5 feet by 10 inches, maybe. Okay, so it is 10 inches. I mean, not enough for like a human person, probably about 10 inches. Not enough for a human torso, usually, and head and all that to get through. All right, so it is, I would describe it as 5 feet by 10 inches. Okay, so pretty narrow, but it's smaller than it is wide, right? Yes, sir. Or taller than it is wide, sorry. And from what I could see on the video when I was watching, the bottom of the window is actually elevated quite a bit in that room, maybe face level or higher, right? I would say so. Okay, so the higher portion of the window you really can't see because you something something, right? No. Sorry, it says inaudible. Um, Answer no, the window probably starts probably, I would say waist high maybe. Okay. Do you recall specifically Mr. Allen's window being damaged when he was moved into that cell? I remember it being scratched. Okay, and then it had to be replaced? We replaced it, yes. Is it fair to say there are policies regarding the amount of recreation that Mr. Allen would get while in that setting? Correct. And you told me in part of the deposition that he would get 3 to 4 1 hour sessions a week. Is that right? I think they're allotted 5, yes. In depositions, you told me 3 to 4. I believe they're allotted 5. So did you go back and check the policy since I last talked to you? No, I just believe they're allotted 5. So he changed his beliefs of what they're allotted. Okay, very well. So 5 1 hour sessions. Correct. All right, when available. And do you acknowledge that there are times when those sessions can be curtailed because he is on some other form of watch, whether it be constant or close supervision? Correct. Or refusals. So, like he's refusing to go on his rec time, which, I mean, that might be so, but for the most part, they're denying him his rec time, it seems. And do you acknowledge that there were long periods of time while Mr. Allen was detained in Westville when, in fact, he was on either constant or close watch? Sure, I'm not sure the duration he was on them, but he was on both those. And in fact, you do acknowledge that when he showed up at a prison doorstep, so to speak, in November of 2022, that he was immediately placed on this self deletion watch, this observation. He says, I don't recall whether he was placed on self deletion watch, one of those words that really flags your videos on YouTube. So sorry for the annoying, stupid phrases that we have to use. All right, if he was, it's because he was on self deletion watch as he was transported to us. I'm not sure when Westville put him on that watch. Okay, very good. Do you recall that he was placed on this watch roughly from about April 1st of 2023 through the rest of his stay, December 5th, I believe, of 2024? There was intermittent periods where he was on or off. I'm not sure of the exact dates when he was on or off, but it was intermittent. Thank you for that. The point being that when you're on this particular watch, then some of your privileges can be cut off, right? That is true if he's on constant. Let's talk about Mr. Allen's visitation at the prison, okay? Yes, sir. Do you acknowledge that when there were visits, when with his lawyers and his family, that he was transported by a number of guards? Yes, sir. Do you acknowledge that he was fully shackled when that occurred? I do. And when we decide or when we describe the shackles, we're talking about handcuffs, right? Correct. And those handcuffs are a little different than just regular traditional set of handcuffs. They're box cuffs, right? Well, the handcuffs are the same. They just place a box over the handcuffs. Thank you. Thank you for the technical explanation. So traditional handcuffs with a box in them, right? Correct. And the box makes them more restrictive? Correct. So you acknowledge that he also had a belly chain on him when he was transported. That'd be standard. And do you acknowledge that he had ankle shackles or foot shackles when he was transported? Yes, sir. Do you acknowledge that he also had what I don't want to get too technical, but the belly chain is hooked to the box cuffs, right? Correct. So you can't really move your hands. You can move them. They're designed for transportation, so you can eat with them. You can go to the bathroom with them. Well, you have to unhook them from the belly chain to eat, right? No. You don't have to? No, sir. Okay. Do you acknowledge that he also was essentially walked around with I called it a leash, you called it a lead, but it looks like a leash, right? It is a lead, just like you would use with a dog. No, has a little hook on the end with a ring. It's a security lead, correct. Transported with that, correct, right? Yes, sir. Now, you acknowledge that every time that you moved Mr. Allen out of his cell, that there was, strike that, let me rephrase the question. Do you acknowledge that a majority of times that you moved Mr. Allen out of his cell, that you used a video camera to record those movements? It should have been every time. Yes, sir. Okay, I wasn't sure when it started, so I didn't want to force it to a technical error. Right. So you think it was every time. When the order came down, it was every time, yes. I'm not sure when that was started, but it wasn't too long after he got there. Okay, and so essentially, while he was being walked to the shower, he had a video camera on him. Correct. While he was being walked to see his lawyer, Mr. Baldwin, and he had a video camera on him. Yes, sir. Actually assigned an individual to just do that. Yes, sir. So there was someone assigned just to take video of him. And there were even occasions when his lawyers would meet with him. Do you acknowledge when you were video camera or videoing those meetings? Yes, sir. Now, in fairness, it was not in the room, correct? Correct. But the video camera was located directly outside of the window, very near where his lawyers were then. Correct. Do you acknowledge that that video camera was pointed directly at Mr. Allen as he was communicating with his lawyers? I would hope so. I'm not sure how it was pointed, but that's the intent. Are you frigging kidding me? That is such an invasion of privacy. Such an invasion of privacy. And I can't even believe that they would have people eavesdropping or recording these meetings with his attorneys, which are privileged. And that he was required to sit in certain spots that would be for him, certain chairs. Correct. So that the video would be affixed on him firmly. When he was on self deletion watch, correct. Like he's going to do something right in front of his lawyers right there. And during those meetings, he was fully shackled and as you described earlier, right? I'm not sure if I know he was unshackled during his visitations. What about the meetings with his lawyers? I'm not sure. I don't recall. I didn't walk him down there. Okay, did you ever look at any of those video? Any of the video? No, not that video. No. Not any of that video? Not with the attorneys. No. Not by yourself? Never. Okay. Then why take it? Okay, you mentioned his visitation and you thought he was unshackled just a second ago, right? He was. Let's educate the judge about that. He was taken to visitation in the shackled manner that we described. Is that accurate? He was transported there, correct. Okay, and then when he got there, there actually is a process where you go through, that's called the changing of wardrobes. Correct. And he was allowed to sit at a table during that visit, right? He was. And he was allowed a brief embrace with her. Is that correct? I believe so. And do you acknowledge that the two of them were required to sit at a specific table in that visitation room? That's policy, yes. And do you acknowledge that that visitation room was basically empty with the exception of a couple lawyers and some prison guards? It was empty because we made accommodations for Mr. Allen, correct? It's like they're trying to do something good for him. They're just trying to eavesdrop on his conversations. Okay, and do you acknowledge that there were prison guards that were located near him while he visited with his wife? Absolutely. And are basically sitting on each end of him as he sat and talked to his wife. Well, they were in the room. I'm not sure where they were standing, but they were in the room. Well, we've talked about this before, haven't we? When I took your deposition, I'm not sure we talked about this specifically, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I'm I don't know if we've talked about this specifically, but there's guards in every visitation room. All right. Well, there are guards located around the visitation. Is that right? Correct. These people could overhear the things that were being said in the room with him. I don't know where they were standing at. All right. Do you acknowledge that he was not given the basic provision of water during those visits? There's no water during visits. There's what? There's no water during visits. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Okay. Visits, there is a water fountain in the room, isn't there? There is. And it's just right next to where he was sitting. There is. And there are vending machines in the room. Also true. And when other inmates have visitations, their family members get to buy things for them, don't they? I believe for $5, correct. Well, there's like 10 vending machines in there, right? There is. Okay, so having something to drink in that room is not a novel idea, is it? Having something to drink in that nobody from Westville gets water in there. He was going to say something else. And then he stood firm. He's like, nobody gets water. Rah. Makes no sense. Okay. Visits tend to be an hour long. I think we granted Mr. Allen 2 hours of visits. Uh, Question. His wife didn't get any water either, did she? No, sir. Not that I recall. Pretty reasonable request, though. It's policy, sir. I'm sorry? I said it's policy. Policy? Yes, sir. So you can have a Pepsi, but you can't have water. Correct. Alrighty. That's how I would answer that. Alrighty then. You're not allowed to get up. You're not allowed to get up is probably why that's there. You're not allowed to use the restroom. You're not allowed to use water. He's the warden. Shouldn't he know why this rule exists? You're not allowed to use water. You're not allowed to get up and walk around. Your visitors can, but the inmates cannot. All right, so there's no reason why she couldn't get up and get a drink. I'm not sure. Do you recall that during Rick's stay at the unit, there were tasers that were used to assist in his detention? I recall two incidents, yes. And do you recall that those incidents basically involved a situation where he was placed back in his confinement cell and wouldn't remove his hands from the cuff ports? That is correct. So, to educate the judge again, the cuff port is the phrase that you use for the little slit in the door where you put your inmate's food. Correct. Or pass them items to the inmate without opening the door, right? Yes. And that cuff port, actually, I looked it up on the internet the other day to see. I thought it was like a 5 by 5 portal or something. It's just generally, I don't know the dimensions of it. I would guess, just guessing, probably 3 feet in diameter, 8 inches high. Okay. When I say 5 by 10, I'm talking inches too, to be clear. You think that it's about 3 foot wide? Probably, yeah. And that's what you use for taking handcuffs off and things like that, right? And fast food. We're talking about the use of force. Is it ac- sorry, I'm listening for the dog. Is it accurate to say that the two times that the taser was at least deployed was because he wouldn't take his hands out of the cuff port, right? Correct. So he got tased for that? And I suggested, why don't you just walk down for a second until he takes his hands out and then close the door, right? Remember, we suggested that to you? I remember the suggestion. And what were your answers? I don't know what my answer was, but my answer today was that would be dangerous to leave the cuff port open. Okay, because he was some threat to these offenders? He could be, yes, through a cuff port. I mean, he's in the most confined place in your entire prison, right? All 250 cuff ports are shut. Okay, but do you agree that he was in the most confined cell in your entire prison? Same cell, just with a camera. Did he have any track record at all, of doing anything to harm any of the guards? Not that I, leading up to those circumstances, not that I recall. So he wasn't a threat to anybody, was he? There are some non-compliance, but he wasn't a threat, no. So when you don't comply, you get punished by getting tased. Is that what you're saying? If we can't secure the door, yes. Now, like he really needed to be tased for that. Can't you just move his hands? I mean, seriously, you don't have to. Can't you just like push his hands in? I don't know. You don't have to tase the guy. All right, so now let's talk about assignments made by Mr. Allen. You told me that you heard him make some incriminating statements. Incriminating statements. I think you told me about 3 to 5 different times when you were at the prison, roughly. And those are all occurred at the cell, the cell door, sorry. Those all occurred at the cell door. Is that accurate? Either through the cell door or through written communication. Okay, well, I'm talking about what you heard. Yes, through the cell door. And do you acknowledge that those communications also occurred when someone else from the prison, whether an inmate companion or a guard, was present? Yes, sir. And you told me that you never documented any of this stuff, right? I did not. But that those interactions would have been documented by either a prisoner or a guard? That would have been, yes. Or that they could have been, yes. And I think what you told me was, forgive me if I'm wrong, but those statements that he made were what I'm going to call my term generic statements. Basically, I double L'd those girls. They were a little, I mean, he mentioned them by name. I think the dog's knocking. Hold on one second. All right, we're back. Let's keep going. So he, sorry, I know for me, it's like I got to get back into it in my brain. But you guys just heard what I said. So he's asking, did they just say generic things? Answer, they were a little, I mean, he mentioned them by name. So he mentioned the girls. Okay, he mentioned them by name. Nothing, there was no detail involved in the statements, right? Other than that? No, sir. Now, you are aware, were you aware that there was an active law enforcement investigation going on while he was detained in your prison? I wasn't aware of it. You didn't know that. It wouldn't surprise me, but I wasn't aware of it. Okay, are you aware that law enforcement officers were coming into your facility during his stay at Westville and interviewing your guards and inmate companions? I don't recall them interviewing any inmates. So they interviewed the guards? Okay, no. You don't have any knowledge of that? No. If that were happening, would you expect that would be something that you would have knowledge of? I would hope so, yes. All right. Do you have any recollection of any police officers coming into the facility to talk to anybody about Rick Allen's detention circumstances between November of 2022 and December of 2023? The only law enforcement that I can't even remember his name, but came to my office and spoke to me briefly, but I don't remember anyone interviewing guards or inmates there, no. I couldn't hear. What did you say at the end? I said I don't remember any law enforcement coming in and interviewing Mr. Allen or guards, no. Give me a second. I need to look real quick. Well, let's just talk about prison life in general. You'd acknowledge that living in prison can be really tough on people. It can be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Really? Prison's just uncomfortable. Okay. And especially on their mental state? Sure. And that detaining someone in a secure unit like the WCU can be even tougher on an inmate. Some prefer it so, but it can be tougher on an inmate. Sure. And those who don't prefer it concede to that. Was there ever any suggestion from Rick Allen while he was there that he preferred to be in that confinement cell? No, not that I'm aware of. Thank you. You acknowledged to me in the deposition. I think the phrase was a major adjustment for somebody in their life, right? Sure. Especially if you've never been in prison before. Correct. Are you aware that Rick Allen has not one speck of criminal history before he walked into the facility? I don't know his background. Okay, let's talk about the inmate companion program, okay? Sure. You guys refer to it, you staff members refer to it as a self deletion companion program, is that right? Correct. Is that the technical phrase? It's one of the phrases, yeah. Is it accurate to say that basically there are employees at your facility that recruit inmates to participate in this program? I don't know if we recruit them. They come from the Plus program. Okay. Plus program is a program in the prison that offers inmates up an opportunity to engage in positive activities, right? Correct. I'm talking pretty broadly here, but that's generally accurate. Yes. With those activities can come time cuts and things that they can do to get out earlier. Is that fair? I don't know if they involve time cuts. I'm not sure really. I don't know if they do or not. It's a purposeful living unit. Okay. So it's a unit. Is it kind of like a trustee unit where you've got people that garner a little bit more trust than normal? In theory, yeah. And these people are all still convicted felons, right? Correct. And those convictions, it's okay to, or it's accurate to say, can include anything from homicide down to theft, I would suppose, and everything in between. Sure. And so one of the incentives, hold on one sec. Sorry, it's going to be that lunchtime for the doggies, and they're getting antsy. All right, so anyways, and so one of the incentives, is it accurate to say that one of the incentives for getting into the program would be you'd get to be in this other dorm, the plus unit or whatever you call it? I couldn't hear you. Say that again, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. Is it accurate to say that one of the incentives of being in this self deletion companion program is that you get to live in the plus house, the plus dorm? That's one of them, sure. So you get to live in a better unit and you get benefits from doing this. So what? Mm, there are so many problems with this. It's a conflict of interest. It's a better place to live than being in general population, right? I mean, it's the most crowded place to live. That's not answering the question. Okay, well, but the amenities are better. They get more privileges. No. Okay, then why would people want to live in there rather than living in the general population? To be around more positive people. Yeah, right. That's not what they're going in there for. I call total BS. People in prison don't want to surround themselves with other positive people. They I don't think that's the number one thing that they're concerned about. Anyways, okay, it's a different unit altogether, though, right? Correct. Different set of walls? Yes, sir. And these companions, one of their responsibilities is that they would sit at the door of someone, an inmate, another inmate, and basically engage in observations, right? Correct. And is it accurate to say that they're given paper and pens and things of that nature to assist in that process? Yes. And is it accurate to say that the companion program is really set up for that purpose to help you monitor other inmates? Yes. You being the custodial staff, right? Correct. I mean, custodial staff still check them, they still do their normal rounds. They just don't ignore and say to the companion, just you have this individual, and we're not going to while they're checking them. So, I mean, we still do our normal rounds. I understand that. Thank you. So you've got a guard in that unit, but basically, you've got this companion sitting at the doorstep, that's my phrase, at the door of the inmate making these observations. Yes, sir. I think you told me at one point they're like 5-minute observations. Is that accurate? It depends what they're on. Close contact, 15-minute check. So 15 minutes, they're saying. Close, close, constant, 15-minute checks. Would Rick have been on those observations at times during his stay? Intermittently, yes. And they're essentially reporting what he's doing, right? Yes. And I've read the log sheets. Sure. They might even report that he's doing nothing, right? Fair to say. What he's saying, they record that, right? Yes. The way he's acting? Yes. Emotions are even communicated in some of those sheets? Probably. In terms of being on formal self deletion watch, is it fair to say, is it accurate to say that mental health makes that decision? Correct. Is that in consultation with you as the warden? No. I might have asked you this question earlier, so forgive me, but do you acknowledge that Rick Allen was on this self deletion watch at times in your penitentiary when he was not having those ideations? He says, I would. I'm not a mental health professional, so they give the orders, we follow them. Okay, you don't know that? No. Would you defer to Dr. Walla with regard to that issue? No. She wouldn't have information about whether or not he was on self deletion watch. She would write the orders and we'd follow them. Okay, maybe the word I used was the wrong one. Let me ask you this. Do you agree that she would be a better source of information about when he was on this watch and when he was not? Yes, they're her orders. Thank you. Yeah. Some of those prison companions were people that were convicted of crimes of dishonesty. Is that accurate? That's a good question. Trying to discredit these companions, whatever they're called, prison companions. I would suppose I'm not sure what they were committed for. Well, first of all, you're the warden, so you should know what charges they were brought into your facility for. And secondly, you're putting these people in charge of a very important task. I would think you might want to know who you're trusting in those situations. Question: theft, fraud, forgery, those kind of things? Supposedly, yes. Well, do you have those kinds of people in that prison? We do. And the rules regarding the companions, do you acknowledge prohibit communications between the companion and the inmate? So whoever's watching him is not supposed to speak to him. Yes. There's no doubt that the companions aren't supposed to be discussing legal matters with the inmates, right? Correct. And I think that's one of the allegations is that some of the companions were talking to Rick Allen and they were talking to him about his case, about legally what's going on in his case, and that's really a big no-no. All right, so he says correct. Did you ever answer that there were companions that were talking to Rick Allen about his circumstances, whether personal or legal? Did you ever discover? What did I say? Did you ever answer? I don't know. Did you ever discover? Let me just read that again because I'm not sure what I said. Did you ever discover that there were companions that were talking to Rick Allen about his circumstances, whether personal or legal? I was not aware of any, no. Have you ever read or are you aware of the transcribed statement of inmate Lacey Patton Jr.? Don't know who he is. So the answer is no. The answer is no. Are you aware or have you been privy to the transcribed statement of inmate Jason Elliott? Not sure who he is either, sir, so the answer is no. To the extent that those statements were provided or were given to law enforcement, you don't have any knowledge of it. Is that accurate? That's true. I read the statement from Lacey Patton, and I've given to the court previously, and in that statement, Mr. Patton admitted that he communicated with his child's mother and his family about Rick's confessions. Let's just hypothetically assume that that's true. Would that be an accurate thing for an inmate companion an appropriate thing for that inmate companion to do. Assuming it's true, probably not. No, they're not supposed to have any communication. So Mr. Patton admitted that he communicated with his child's mother and his family about Rick's confessions. So he's, yeah, he's getting confessions out of Rick and then going and telling his family members that that this happened, which is a big no-no. All right, so do you agree that it would be a violation of the inmate companion rules? Yes. Some Same question with regard to Jason Elliott. He would have done the same. Correct. Do you believe that that would be a violation of Rick's privacy rights within the prison under the policies? If a companion was talking to him, was talking to their family about what he was saying. Attorney Stacy Diener says, "May I ask a clarifying question, Judge?" The court says, "You may." Ms. Diener says, "Warden Gallipo, does the prison or DOC as a whole have a confidentiality policy for prisoners?" I'm unaware. Thank you. I'm not sure, ma'am. I'd object to the question. The court asks, "Any response?" Mr. Rosie says, "I'm sorry, Judge." Any response? No. Okay, sustained. Question. Are you aware that the inmate companion program has a set of rules? I'm not sure what those rules are. I would hope so. So you don't even really know? No, sir. He's a warden. He's supposed to know everything in that building. Question. Do you acknowledge that the inmate companions would fill out these log sheets? You called them bed boards, I think was the phrase I remember, and then those would be secured in a location within the prison? Yes, sir. I think you told me in some box or something, didn't you? I believe so. Yeah, they were put in a box. Okay, and where and what was the ultimate destination to those log sheets? They would go to Dr. Walla. They'd be filed in his medical record and probably case notes uploaded in the EMR. We have received those, Mr. Allen, through the course of discovery from the state. Can you tell the judge how it is that those log sheets got from your prison to law enforcement? I can't answer that, no. Who at your prison could have given them that? I'm not sure how they got to law enforcement. I couldn't answer that. Maybe through a subpoena? Our process is we collect the self-deletion companion logs, which are different from the door sheets. They got in a secure box. Dr. Weller would pick them up. She would put them in Mr. Allen's medical record and upload it to the emergency record service. So if it turns out that the evidence suggests that those did land in the hands of law enforcement, would you agree that it wasn't at your command? Not at mine, no. And it wasn't at your approval? Not at mine, sir, no. Because if things like that are getting out of the prison, private information like that, you would be approving to that, right? I would hope so. And you didn't in this case. Had no knowledge of it. Did you ever request that Rick Allen permission, either written or verbal, to release any of those records to anyone outside of the prison? I released those records to the central office. That's the only people that we release them to. So how did law enforcement who was investigating this find those records? Okay. Now, to make sure I understand this, you told me either you released them to Dr. Walla. Dr. Walla collects them. Okay. So if we got a request, those documents would be turned over to central office. Okay. Oh, sorry, that was the answer. So if we got a request, those documents would be turned over to central office. Okay, did you get a request? Yes, but not from law enforcement. No. Okay, from the central office? Correct. And so you gave them to the central office? Correct. Do you suspect that maybe just opining here that the central office might have given them to law enforcement? It's possible. Did anybody ever tell you that, hey, the cops want these records, would you get them to the central office, central administration? I just gave them to the central office as advised. I have no idea how they got into any law enforcement's hands. Okay, but there was a trail of these records being processed from the doorstep of Rick's cell, at least to the central office that you're familiar with. I'm not sure what records would be kept in central office. May have, uh, what? Maybe I didn't ask a very good question. So, um, typo. I'm sorry. I'm going to withdraw the question. Do you agree that there is a chain of custody, we might call it, of the records that were created at the cell, at Rick Allen's cell, by your companions or your guards, and those records ultimately made it to the central office? Sure. I'm not sure about the if there's a chain of custody filled out. Okay, but yeah. Yeah, you don't really know where they were during this time in the middle of that process, right? I mean, when I turned them over to central office, I don't know if internal affairs turned them over to central office, but there was a request made to gather those documents, and that's what we did. Do you know if who had access to those documents between the time they were created by the author and the time that they made it to the central office? No. Did you ever require anyone from law enforcement to get a court order to obtain any of those records? I did not. So you can't just take people's medical records um, without permission. Hold on. All right. Did you ever require anyone from law enforcement to get a court order? I did not. Did you get any request from media representatives to get those records? I've never dealt with the media in this case. When you released those records to central office, did you report any of that to Mr. Allen, like, hey, I'm just letting you know we released your records to another office or agency or anything like that? No. You didn't seek any kind of consents from him at any point while he was there to release those records? No, they stayed within our agency. Let's talk about the guards that were assigned to Rick's cell, okay? Sure. Do you recall us talking about your decision generally to assign those guards to the cell? I do. And is it accurate to say that you did that when you believed that Mr. Allen was starting to engage in some, what I think you called bizarre behaviors? That is correct. And that was in April of 2023. I'm not sure, but I do recall. That sound about right? It could be, I'm not sure. One second, Your Honor. When was it that you left the prison? Was it February of 2024? I believe so, yes. I'm going to just try to get acclimated to time and place. He was transported out December of 2023, correct? To Wabash Valley. I believe it was sometime in December. Not sure of the exact date, but yeah. When you made that decision with regards to the guards, can you estimate about what time frame it was during his stay at your prison? I made the decisions to put the guards on his cell the day after he received his legal mail. So whatever the date was, I'm not sure, but that's the exact date. Do you know what time of the year that was? What time of the year? Yeah. I'm not sure when he got his legal mail. I don't recall. And so is it fair to say that somebody informed you that he started making some incriminating statements? I'm not sure anyone informed me. I mean, I heard what he told me. Finish that. I said I only heard what he had told me. Okay, and so based on those things and knowing that he was getting his legal mail, you decided to pull the companions and replace them with guards? I replaced them with guards because of his bizarre behavior. Why? What's the difference? What's the difference of why do you need guards rather than companions? Because his behavior was bizarre, for more protection. He was covering himself with feces, he was, washing his face in toilets. Did you believe that guards are more credible than the companions when it comes to relaying information? I didn't want the companions to have access to his legal mail. I didn't want them to see the legal mail. So you didn't trust the companions. It was not that I didn't trust them, I wanted the heightened security since he had his legal mail. All right, and you were concerned that they might see the mail and communicate that to someone else? Yes, I didn't want anyone to have access to it. Do you believe you're going to get a more accurate reporting of Rick Allen's conditions if you place the guards on that cell? I believe I'd get a more accurate, correct. Do you believe or did the guards fill out the same kind of door sheets or forms or bed boards, whatever they did? Sorry, I'm getting sloppy again. Log sheets, bed boards, self-deletion companion logs. Okay, and those would have been 5-minute observation logs? Depending on what he was on, if he was not on a mental health, they would be 15 minutes. And those forms were preserved as well. Is that right? Correct. And they are also some of the forms that you turned over to central administration. Yes, sir. Let's talk about phone calls at the prison, okay? Sure. So, my understanding is that the inmates are subject to this phone system, which is basically run by GTL, I think the name of the company. Correct. Is that generally accurate? Yes. So, the service is subcontracted out to somebody else. Correct. But the Indiana Department of Corrections has an arrangement, some kind of contractual agreement with GTL to do that, right? Yes. Did you monitor, did you or your staff monitor any of the phone calls that would have been made through GTL lines? I did not monitor any phone calls. I'm not sure if Ms. Maps had access to it, but that would be a better question for her. Okay. And this is where things get a little bit more complicated, but there's clearly more than one phone. Let me withdraw that question. There are different phone services that are used at the prison, right? You have the GTL service, but you have your own kind of internal system. Is that correct? Both phones are GTL. Yeah, there's phones in the rec yard and the tablets are GTL. Okay, so the phones in the rec yard are not GTL based? I believe they are GTL. Yes. I'm trying to make sure I understand. Yeah. And then there's a phone that they move around to the cell door once or twice a week, right? That's kind of a portable phone? Yes. And is that not GTL? That's a DOC phone, I believe. Yes. Okay, so there is two different kinds. Okay, yes. There's the GTL setup and there's a DOC setup. Right. Does the person have the ability to monitor the DOC phones? I believe so. Again, that would probably be a better question for maps, but I would assume so, yes. And then there's the tablet, right? Correct. And is that a GTL based product? It is. And so there are communications that can be made by an inmate to other, or by frankly, blah, 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 or that system, right? Inaudible. I mean, they gotta be approved. So whoever is on the phone list would be approved. Okay, so for phone calls, right? I mean, but there's also e-communications, right? What's e-communications? Like texts or emails, and I don't believe there's texts, no. Okay, so those are GTL based. In other words, GTL has access to that information. Correct. Can the prison get access to that information when you need it? I believe internal affairs can, yes. Mr. Rosie says 1 second. Let me redirect you back to the conversation about his cell block, okay? He had a mattress in that block. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. And is it accurate to say that the mattress was essentially on the floor? It was on the bed frame. Okay, but let's get to the heart of this. The bed frame is a metal slab. Is it not? Yes, sir. Okay, and the metal slab is really close to the floor, just within inches of it. Yes, sir. Cell, the cells next door also have the inmates that are next to him in the same have mattresses, correct? All 25 of them, yes, sir. And they also have beds, right? Correct. Bed frames? Correct. There are more traditional bed frames, aren't they? They're just about a foot high. They're elevated? Say that again, sir. They're elevated. Correct. And do you acknowledge That in his cell he had no tables to sit at. There's no tables in any cells. Not in his, right? Not in any, sir. Okay, but I'm talking about his. Okay, there's no tables. All right, and he had no chair to sit on, did he? There's no chairs. Okay, and he was given a cardboard box. That's what he was eating on, right? He was. I don't know if he was eating on it, but typically the cardboard box people put TVs on or personal items. So that was his amenity, a cardboard box, right? Sure. Otherwise, concrete, right? Yes, sir. Steel, rebar. The whole 9 yards? Prison, sir. Yeah. A toilet? Absolutely. Steel? I'm assuming. Mounted on the wall or the floor? It's mounted, yes. A couple of feet from his bed, right? Standard. Basically, he goes to the bathroom pretty much where he lays his head and goes to sleep. I don't know if that's where he lays his head, but yes. A couple of feet, sure. I don't have anything further. Ms. Diener? Woo. Okay. That was direct examination. Now we're moving on to cross examination with Stacy Diener asking the questions of Warden John Gallipo. Warden Gallipo, do you have corrections experience prior to your position in supervision in the Department of Corrections or anywhere? Prior to the Department of Corrections, I was a corporal in the Marine Corps. Okay, and then were you a corrections officer before you moved up the ranks? I was. And so when you gave us a number of your total experience at DOC, the 28 years, does that include your time as a corrections officer? Yes, ma'am. As the warden for Westville, did you have any choice in whether Mr. Allen was assigned to your facility? I did not. Did his placement come with instructions? Yes. From where? Central office. What is this central office and who's behind this? Well, giving all the instructions. And what instructions were you given? Put him in a cell that has camera access to a self-deletion cell, A1 107. Did they actually assign him that cell? There's only 4 cells that have camera access, and A1 107 was one of them. Okay, yep. But I guess I wondered when he gets there, then do you have a choice of any? No, no, ma'am. One of your 4? No, ma'am. So they don't have a choice of any of the. Wait, so who assigned it? I'm confused. Central office assigned them? Put them in a cell. Yeah, the central office gave them the instructions to put him in this particular cell, A107. All right, so no, ma'am. They tell you exactly what cell he goes in. Yes, ma'am. And do you know anything about Richard Allen before he gets there? Never heard of him. Doubt that. With regard to the camera cell, A1107, how many other cells are in your facility? In WCU, there's 4. There's one per pod, A pod, B pod, C pod, and D pod. Okay, and you said that there are 255 people in solitary confinement. Is that describing A, B, C, and D? Correct, ma'am. And of those 255, 4 of them potentially would be in a cell just like his, well, he plus 3 others. Correct. You were asked if there was a camera installed. Is this camera part of the structure of the cell? It is. So you didn't put it in there just because it was him. Correct. And it has no audio? Correct. So how is the camera used and for what purpose? The camera, those cells are normally designed for inmates that are on self-deletion watch so we can monitor behavior through physical presence and a secondary observation. Through physical presence by someone, by a guard, okay? And secondary observation. So if someone's on this watch, typically that video would be put in the control pose so we can have a constant without having a constant order. So a person in a designated location can see what's going on in his cell 24/7. Only one person, the person that works the control room. Okay, so there's one person in the control room. Correct. And this is for safety, correct? Yes. Did you receive any other instructions regarding the safety of Richard Allen with regard to his placement? No. Now remember, he's on a safekeeping order, which means they're doing this for his safety. They're putting him in um, solitary confinement for his safety, even though it's probably doing severe mental health damage to him. But it's for his safety. When you talk about constant watch, was that part of the requirement? Constant, part of our requirement for when he's placed in a camera cell? Yes. Does that, in addition to itself, require you to video him when he is out of his cell? The video out of his cell was a separate order that was specifically designed for Mr. Allen. What? I highlight this sentence because it's weird. That strikes me as very odd. That because it is odd that they're taking video of him as he's leaving his cell to walk to the showers or walk to rec, whatever. And he's saying this is specifically designed for him. That's so strange. Okay. And that order came at the same time or sometime after, if you remember. I believe a few months after. Okay. And again, did you have, excuse me, again, did you have any decision making in that process? No, ma'am. Did you come from central office also? Or did the decision making come from central office also? It did. So by being required to have visual on him at all times, what steps did you have to take to put that into place? Just followed instructions. Anytime he came out of his cell, it's being recorded. And had you had to do that with other inmates before? Yes. And so, what does it involve with regard to personnel? It takes at least two staff to move any offender outside the cell, and there's one more staff for the camera. So I'd take an additional resource of one staff person. Okay, um, so two to actually do the movement, correct, and one to record the event. Yes, ma'am. There was a question about his lights. Was his cell unique to the others in his pod or in the facility with regard to how the lighting works? His lighting was never interfered with. There's a light and he has a button in his cell where he can basically a night light so he can dim it. Okay, so if he doesn't dim the light, it's going to be on? Yes. He's the only one that has access to dim it. His window, was it the same as everyone else's window? Correct. And when you say that you had to replace it or you were asked if you had to replace it, did you have to replace his window? It wasn't scratched up that bad, but the request came in to be replaced, and I'm assuming we replaced it probably within 2 weeks. And where did that request come from? I believe it came from Mr. Allen and Dr. Walla. I believe it came from Dr. Walla. Okay, but you were under no requirement to change that window. It wasn't in violation of policy, was it? No. Were you doing it to assist him with adjustment to his circumstances? Correct. I wasn't doing it to assist Dr. Walla in her orders. Okay, she came to you with other requests, did she not? I believe so. What were the other ones you remember? Specifically his tablet. When he broke the first tablet, Dr. Walla asked if he could get another tablet. I recall that. That was arranged. And did you do so? Excuse me, ma'am? Did you do that for him? We did. So trying to make it like, I'm a nice guy and I was helping him. Even though he broke his tablet, I got him a new one right away. Even though it's being requested for by Dr. Walla, which means he probably had broken it for a while and nobody replaced it for him until Dr. Walla said, hey, guys, he can't talk to his family. Can you please replace his iPad or his tablet, whatever? I'm sure it's not an Apple iPad. All right, explain to us the process of a tablet. So, when a person comes into the facility, are the rules different for a safekeeper or another inmate with regard to access to a tablet? All inmates are issued tablets. Again, this is the first safekeeper I had. So Mr. Allen was issued a tablet. The only thing different is when the general population or anybody else breaks their tablet, they won't get another tablet until they reimburse GTL the $250. He wasn't able to reimburse for the 250, so we assigned him another tablet so he could have communication with his attorneys. We didn't want to interfere with any of his legal process. Oh, we're such nice people. We gave him a tablet minus the 250 that he was supposed to pay for it. We're just wonderful. Okay, so that was the decision that was made. So you're making an effort, an extra effort to assist him. Yes. When he'd gotten his first tablet, did he get it faster or with more expedited processing than maybe an inmate that came in next to him on on the same day? Yes, there's probably a few hundred inmates still that don't have tablets at Westville. And they've been there a long time? Yes, ma'am. Let's talk about the family visit. The family visit was an unusual circumstance, was it not? Very unusual. Another accommodation you made to assist. Correct, Mr. Allen. Were there any conditions attached to that accommodation? To accommodate him, we had to cancel several other inmates' visitations because we had to have the visitation room all to himself. Why? This is all on you guys. You didn't have to cancel. That's on you, wanting him in a room all to himself so you can eavesdrop on his conversations. Typical visitation is 1 hour. I think we allotted 2 hours for him, so yeah, accommodations were made. There's no one. The other 254 inmates that are kept in that unit never have face-to-face visits. He was the only. They all have they all have to use their tablet and talk to their family on their tablet, correct? They don't even use their tablet. So if someone came to visit an inmate there, they would use the kiosk at the front gate and the inmate would go in a different holding area and he would use the kiosk. So no family members are permitted inside segregation. No contact visits are authorized inside segregation except for Mr. Allen. He was the first one I had in my 5 years. Okay, and is the segregation area also sometimes referred to as a restrictive housing unit? Sure. Okay, are those interchangeable or should I not interchange them? The acronym for what? Well, it is the restrictive housing unit. Yes. Okay. Where the visitation was? No, no, no. Where he's housed. Yes, restrictive housing. Yes. Okay. This is so confusing. They're confusing themselves. All right. And so he gets a family visit you arranged for him. Did you tell him you have to confess to me in order to get a family visit? I never asked him any questions. Was Dr. Walla his advocate for requesting you to accommodate such? As far as the visits, I think that came from central office because the request was made, I believe, maybe from Mr. Rosie, if the family could come in and visit, and we honored that and made arrangements for that. Okay, so you actually were asked to do it by the central office, but it was up to you to figure out how to logistically make it happen? The logistics, yes. Okay, so in his family visit, that doesn't happen for people in your unit? Correct. Did you have to make a decision as to whether he would be unshackled in order to hug his wife? No. So, routine. The only time he was shackled or restrained was during transportation. Once he got to the destination, like Mr. Rosie explained, he changed into a jumpsuit. The restraints were removed, which was also very unusual for someone assigned to RHU. Restraints are never removed outside of cell. Okay, so another accommodation made for him? Yes. And the reason he couldn't have water or go to the bathroom you indicated was because he couldn't leave his chair. Correct. And was that for safety reasons? It's safety reasons for trafficking. When people use the bathroom, they might leave something in the bathroom and the inmates will follow. So if they go to the bathroom, visitations are canceled. Okay, well, why don't you have the visitors use a separate facility and the inmates using one that's off public or off limits to the public. It's really a no-brainer. Okay, so a family member, for people who don't understand this, could go to the restroom, leave something behind, and then if Mr. Allen goes to the restroom, that would be trafficking. If he picks it up. If they left something behind for him. Correct. Okay, and so that was the circumstance of his family visit? Yes. Now, again, that was recorded. Was it recorded visually because of the constant watch order? So, when he went to the visitation room, all visitation rooms have camera access. So, whether it be 4 or 5 cameras, so at that time, we didn't have the need to put the handheld recorder because there's already cameras in the location. Okay, so when the question was posed that there were guards in the room, you indicated there were always guards in the room. Always. Okay. So are you there to listen to his conversation? No. Why are you there? To provide security. Okay. Did you review any documents in preparation for today or for your deposition about events of when a taser was used on Mr. Allen? No. And so, if the records would reflect that the taser was used on one occasion and another occasion was just physical placement of hands by a guard on him to subdue him. Right. The taser was used. Would you know whether that's correct? The taser was used because, like I said, he refused to shut the cuff port. Okay. And that's a safety risk? Yes. And the dates of the taser use, to my knowledge, occurred during May or around that time period when Mr. Allen had been in the facility for quite some time at that point, correct? I believe so, yes. So at that point, would it have been clear to him that you don't leave your hands in the cuff port to refuse to put them in the cuff port? Objection, speculation, sustained. Is it a regular procedure that an offender would be required to follow orders of transport officers with regard to placing their hands in the cuff port for the putting the cuffs on or off or to remove them once that's complete? Correct. And so they would have the rules to follow with regard to how they respond to that. Correct. And an inmate population is well aware of those rules. I'm sorry, say it again. Mr. Allen would have been well aware of those rules then that the cuff port is to be secured. Thank you. So, walking away as suggested to just let Mr. Allen calm down and decide to follow the rules would not be acceptable. The guards would be in trouble. Correct. How much participation in the placement of uh, sorry, how much participation in the placement of companions do you have? You said you don't decide if a companion is assigned, but in this situation, you say that you did not, you did change them. I did. And so, do you closely monitor what inmate companions are doing or not? I typically my brain is getting tired. You can't tell, I'm an hour in, my brain's tired and it gets all blurry in my mind. Let me take a real quick break and I'll be back fresh. Hold on. All right. That should be better. So do you closely monitor what inmate companions are doing or not doing? I typically don't look at the log sheets. The only time I intervene with the companions is how many he would be allotted to have. I think when he first got there, they switched, I believe, every 4 hours, the inmate companion. So I don't know. I'm just going to throw out the number. Westville may have 50 to 60 or 70 companions. I wanted to limit the number that were assigned to him just to control communication, so I believe I probably allowed 8 different companions to monitor his activity. And when you say monitor his communication, is that because you are trying to elicit certain information from him? I'm not trying, I'm trying to not expose information. The less people that deal with Mr. Allen, the better. Unfortunately, inmates do talk to each other. Okay, so your efforts were intended to keep it quiet that Mr. Allen is there? Correct. And what happens when a lot of people know that a high profile detainee is in the prison? They communicate. Okay, and you're trying to keep that to a minimum? Correct. When you say he received his legal mail and it resulted in you making a change, what was your purpose in changing it to the guards? Because I didn't want inmate companions, to have access to his legal mail. Hold on. Now all the dogs are filtering back into the room and tiptoes the noise. Sorry. All right, so I didn't want companions to have access to his legal mail. He still had the ability to shove legal mail through the door if he wanted to, so I wanted to eliminate that possibility at all from his legal mail ever having the chance to circulate through the inside of the prison or the outside of the prison. Outside the prison. Through outside. That makes no sense. Okay, sorry. So, did you have a conversation with the guard companions about what the expectations would be as a door companion, or had that had they done that job before and they knew? They have not. We just told them to document the behavior. We put out an order if anyone was to go inside Mr. Allen's cell for any routine searches or shakedowns, it would be myself, the major, or the lead captain. In the case of an emergency, of course, responding staff could go in the cell, but when his legal mail was in there, those are the three people that had access to go inside. So, can you repeat who those would be? Myself, Major Cornett, and lead captain Gary Lewis. Cornett, correct. And the other one, Gary Lewis, correct. Are these supervisors? The highest of supervisors. Major Cornett is the highest ranking custody supervisor, and Captain Gary Lewis is the highest ranking custody supervisor in that unit. And you did that for Mr. Allen's protection of his legal, correct, case information. Was there a rule? We were talking about what were the officer companions told with regard to their responsibilities. So you said document behavior? Correct. Document anyone entering the cell? Yes. Is writing down what he says a directive? It's not a directive. Some choose to be very detailed and some not. What about their behavior would fall? What about his behavior would create increased responsibilities for a door companion? How his behavior would increase responsibilities? Yes. If his behavior became bizarre, which it did, then we switched him to officers. Okay, and when you've got officer companions and they're documenting behavior, did they have any responsibilities with regard to additional responsibilities or actions based on Mr. Allen's behavior? No. Okay. If Mr. Allen was self-harming, were they just supposed to write it down, or what would they do? They would alert staff. Okay. I would look at that as an additional responsibility. Correct. That's kind of what I'm looking for here. Are there any other additional responsibilities they would have? To alert staff, yeah. Okay, sure. And at one point, did you have to have another conversation with officer staff? That just sounds weird. Officer staff, because there was an incident or self-harm and you wanted to reiterate to them the concern. Yes, my concern was they need to stop it. Okay, did you have to do that more than once? Only once. Now, other people had these companions in your facility, correct? Correct. It's frequent. And do all these companions serve the same function? They do. And do all of the companions' logs get put in the same place as Mr. Allen's? Yes. And are they, strike that, no. Mr. Allen's were placed and Ms. Blah, blah, blah would pick them up. I think they mean Walla, but she's the doctor, so maybe not. Maybe it's the Ms. Maps. I don't know. And how was that different from what would happen with the others? Well, when he first got there, it wasn't a secure box, and we found it necessary to put them in a secured box. So we had a few that went missing, none of his, but we needed to put them in a secured box where the unit team manager or Dr. Walla would only have access to that box. Okay, so a companion gets done with their shift. They have their log. Correct. They go put it in the locked box for Mr. Allen? Yes. And if they weren't watching Mr. Allen, they would just put it in a location? Same box. Same box? Same box. Okay. Yeah, and there was a locked portion for Mr. Allen's. There was a locked portion for all of them. That was a transition we did. Before there wasn't, it was just you put it in a inbox, and then we decided it's probably best that we secure it, so we put it in a lockbox. Okay, so that locking down of these logs, once they were put in the box, was done for all offenders having companions? Correct. And then a supervisor sorted them out? Correct. And sent them on their way? Yes, ma'am. Was any companion, inmate, or officer directed by you or anyone you're aware of to ask Mr. Allen about his charges or his offense? None. Did you ever ask him about his charges or his offense? Never. If an inmate companion told a family member that Mr. Allen was confessing, you indicate that you have no knowledge of that. I would not have knowledge of it, no. Are you involved with administration to the effect that you know why companions fill out log sheets? I'm not sure where that originated, no, but there's a mental health order that they fill out the log sheets. Okay, was there anything different about Mr. Allen getting his legal mail that was unique? The only thing that was unique about it all is the only thing that was unique about it is all legal mail throughout the facility is copied, so they don't get the originals. Mr. Allen did get his originals, so they were not copied. Why is that different? What would be the reason for copying legal mail before it goes to an offender? The introduction of drugs. A lot of legal mail is not really legal mail. It's just from a fake law address, and they can spray K2 or synthetic marijuana on it, and the offenders get the legal mail and they smoke it. Okay, thank you. You were asked about the conditions of his cell that has no table, no chairs, mattress on the floor. You indicated no inmate has a table or chair. Is that correct? That is correct. And what would be the reason, if any, that the bed in an isolation camera cell would be basically on the floor? So the inmates that were on the self deletion watch can't get away from observation and go under the bed. So again, it's for his safety. For his safety. Did Mr. Allen make a specific request to speak with you with regard to a confession? I believe one or two times, yes. How was his request? In a form delivered to you? In a request for interview, I believe it was. Is that written? Yes. What do you do when someone in Mr. Allen's position makes a written request like that? In this case, I turn them over to internal affairs. So if he sends you a written request to confess, you don't go talk to him? No. Ms. Diener says, Judge, may I approach the witness? The court says you may. Warden Gallipo, I'd like to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 8. Will you take a look? It's got 2 pages. Make sure you have a chance to see both. Mr. Rosie says 8, and she confirms. He says yes. Mr. Warden Gallipo. Can you identify those? Yes, I can. And the first page is chain of evidence, an evidence record to say what I did with the letters. On the first request for interview, I dated it 3/5/2023 at 6:50 or 6:47 or 4:47, signed it and gave it over to internal affairs with his request. I'd like to ask you about that. Sure. Now, the top page is when you turned it over to internal affairs. Is that chain of custody? Yes. That one's dated April 5th, and the other document, that's actually a written request by Mr. Allen, has a date in March. Do you believe that he did that twice? And maybe I believe I did get more than one request. I definitely remember this one. Okay. And this one was dated March because I put the date on it myself. On the evidence card, I would put the dates. So you had at least one request from him and you recognize that? Yes. And the chain of custody form, it may be for a secondary request or it may be misdated. Correct. or unless there were two pieces. It looks like they were both collected on internal affairs in April, and this was in March, so I'm not sure how soon they got it, but how do you get it to them? Any things I would get unusual requests, requests for interviews, requests for a Bible, whatever internal affairs would pick up. I wouldn't know if they pick it up weekly, but I'd make sure it left my office and down to internal affairs so it could be secured. How does it get from your office to internal affairs? Do you have a runner? Internal affairs comes to transport it. They'll come themselves to get it. Okay. In this case, who transported those would have been in this case, who transported those would have been Ms. Mapps. Looks like Jessica signed that, which is also an investigator for internal affairs, and she's also a CPO, so a certified police officer for the Department of Correction transported his mail. Okay. So you have a designated place where you put things for internal affairs and they come get them when they choose. They come get it, put it in their evidence box, which is located in their office under camera. Okay, date would move to admit Exhibit 8. Mr. Rosie has no objection. The court says, all right, without objection, it is admitted. So you did not interview him pursuant to his request? No. How much contact would you have face to face with Mr. Allen? When he first got there, I'd say that I would look at him visually, probably daily for the first maybe 2, 3, 4 months, then kind of maybe a few times a week. Then, when the bizarre behavior continued, probably daily, and then that tapered off maybe a few times a week. I go on these pods daily, whether it be A107 or C107, and I was in that unit daily. And that's how you choose to do your job, to keep track of what was going on. I have to be on that unit, so does the major. Okay. And so during some of those face to face contacts with Mr. Allen, how would you approach him with regard to conversation? I wouldn't approach him. I would look into his cell, and if he approached me or conversated with me, then I would answer his question. And during those times, did he make statements to you about the crimes he's been charged with? Yes. And did he provide you any details? No, he just confessed. Okay. And you indicated that may have written down that may have been written down by someone else in the vicinity. Is that correct? There is an annotation in a log where he also confessed, and that was in more detail than what he would verbally tell me. Okay, you're saying the log, being the companion sheet, correct, had more details than when he spoke to you? Correct. Were you also present for some of his statements containing details related to these homicides, when he was in the presence of others besides door companions? Not that I'm aware of, no. If I directed your attention to maybe meeting with medical, it's possible. So I was both in I'm not sure what he said during medical, but I was in both when he got his medications and they were both recorded. Is that what you're referring to? Yes. Yeah. You weren't the only one that heard these things. No, no. And to the extent that there were multiple people present, it was also recorded on the handheld camera? Correct. And you're familiar with those statements. I was not familiar with the exact statements. I remember them because they were in the nurses' station and in segregation, so it would have been Dr. Martin and the medical team doing assessments. And when I say familiar, I'm not saying do you remember them verbatim. I guess what I'm saying is do you remember the circumstances of the situation that he was making them? Yes. And was anyone interrogating him? No. Was anyone asking him questions about his crime? No. Are you aware of any time that anyone did? I'm unaware, no. In fact, were there times that you spoke with Mr. Allen and that he indicated that he was properly cared for at your facility? He was. And were there times, that's not he did communicate, it's just he's saying, yes, he was properly cared for, not that he indicated. Um, and words matter. He said he was, meaning this guy's opinion is he was properly cared for, not Yes, Rick Allen indicated that. Otherwise, you would have replied, he did. You know what I'm saying? He kind of is telling on himself there by saying was instead of did. All right. And were there times where he was at, and of course, it could just be a mistake, but I think this guy's biased for sure. And were there times when he was asked if he needed anything and he indicated he was fine with what he had? I asked him personally if he needed anything. Didn't answer the question. In fact, you offered to him a loaner television. Was that, what was the circumstances of that? We have loaner televisions, yeah, based on same way with the tablet. It's kind of like mental health progression order. If your behavior continues to behave, then he gets, certain privileges. Okay, so it was a situation where you were offering an earned privilege if his behavior improved. If I recall, I remember him saying he didn't want one. Okay. Was it directed at him disclosing information about his crime? No, nope. Did Mr. Allen ever tell you that someone was interrogating him or coercing him to make statements? No, he did not. Would he have had ample opportunity to do that? Would he have? Yes. Or he would have, yes, sorry. My brain transposes things. I never used to be like that, but autoimmune diseases do weird things to your mind. So Ms. Diener says, I have no other questions. The court says, Mr. Rosie, he says, Judge, can I have permission to ask a few omitted questions? She says, certainly. He says, thank you. Now redirect examination of Warden John Gallipo. Questions by Mr. Rosie. Warden Gallipo, you have a case management system at that prison. I think maybe it's called Insight, if I'm not mistaken. Are you familiar with that? It's called Insight? I might be getting it confused with another. Do you have a case management system at the prison? We have case managers, yes. And to be clear, do you have the ability to access records at the prison through a computer or through the computer database about people's criminal histories and their circumstances in the criminal justice system? I mean, I don't. You're a freaking warden. How do you not? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, does that even sound familiar? Insight does not sound familiar. No. Okay, do you have access to any system where you can get on and say, okay, this is what Rick Allen was convicted of, or this is what Sam Smith down in cell block A107 was convicted of? Anything like that? Yeah, I have access to see why people are incarcerated. Yes. Okay, and what's that? What system are you accessing? I'm not accessing anything. I would just ask or check their personal packet. Okay, so a personnel packet is one place you go. Sure. I'm assuming that's an electronic one? Both. Do you have the ability? This guy is either really dumb or really evading questions. Do you have the ability as a warden to access information about other people in the DOC that are not in your facility? Do I have access to find out where they're at and what their crimes are? Yes. Sure. And what system do you use to locate or to access that? It's on the internet. It's on the Indiana Department of Correction homepage. You go to inmate locator, type in their DOC number, and it provides the information. Okay, so you use the same system I do to find out where somebody is, don't you? Sure. And what if you wanted more personal information about their intake at the facility? For example, like at RDC, do you have the ability to access that? I have the ability to access their packets. Could you say that again? I have the ability to look at their packets. Where are those packets located? In the records room. I never had a reason to, but they're kept in the records room. Okay, so if somebody were housed while you were at Westville, if somebody were housed at Wabash Valley, for example, you would have the ability to look at a packet of information. It'd give you detailed information about that inmate. No, that packet would be at Wabash. What is this guy talking about? Okay. So I'm gonna try and be trying to ask as clear of questions as I can. If is there any information that's available to you at the DOC regarding the details of other inmates outside of Westville and their incarceration in DOC? No. Is there a policy that prohibits the use of inmate information for personal reasons? In other words, like you can't get on there and start looking up a case because you have some personal interest in the matter. I'm not sure. I mean, you can on Google. I mean, no, I'm talking about just the DOC here for a minute, buddy. No. Things that the public can't get their hands on? No. Do you have any policy that you're familiar with that says you can't do this for personal reasons? Not that I'm familiar with, no. Now, I'm reacting to Ms. Diener's questions to you. She asked some questions that Rick's initial assessment to Westville. Do you recall those last questions? Yes. And you said that you didn't have any choice about his assignment, right? That is correct. If you don't want someone at Westville, do you have the ability as the boss to just call and say, we really don't want him here anymore? Not how it works there. So the answer is no. The answer is no. Ms. Diener was asking you about the number of people in the WCU unit. I think you told her about 255. Is that correct? Do you remember that? Correct. How many of those other people in that, of those 250, are pretrial detainees? One. And who's that? Mr. Allen. Meaning everyone else is a convicted felon that is in that prison. He's the only one that has not even gone to trial yet. And how many of those people in the 250 have never been convicted of a crime before? None. Ms. Diener asked you about the cameras in the cell. Do you recall that? Yes. And I think what you said is that those cameras were permanently mounted in the cell, right? Correct. So he was put in that cell specifically because the cell had the capacity to take video of him while he was there. Correct. And you said there's only one person that can see that video, right? Correct. And that person would be what I'm going to loosely refer to as the control officer, maybe that was on duty. That's correct. Now, if there were other officers standing there talking to the control officer, they could certainly see it, right? I mean, they're not allowed in the control room. What about the next control officer that comes in? They would have access. So that's two people, right? Correct. And then so on and so forth. Correct. You can have lots of people that work in the control room. Not lots, but selective. There's a lot of training in the control room. You have turnover too at the DOC, right? Of course. WCU is considered a disciplinary unit, isn't it? We have all forms of inmates in there that are not disciplinary. Okay, I'll get to that. But it's considered disciplinary, isn't it? Sure. And administrative? Sure. And so many of the inmates that are housed in the WCU are there because they're being punished for wrongdoing in other parts of the prison. They're being sanctioned, correct. And those inmates have 8.5 by 12 and then 8.5 by 12.5 foot cells, correct? All the same. Concrete and steel, all that. The toilets that's mounted to the wall, correct. Just like Rick Allen's, yes, yes, sir. So he was treated just the same as those inmates who were on disciplinary segregation for those other conduct violations. Correct. So the way they were treating him is as if they were punishing him. He's being punished for something. You told Ms. Diener that you made accommodations for him, right? I did. Made an accommodation by getting him the tablet, right? Correct. And you made an accommodation by replacing the window in his cell. Correct. Did you replacing his tablet place some significant burden on you or your staff? It's not the way we treated the rest of the facility, and you had. No, I'm asking. They interrupt each other so much. I'm asking you if it was real burdensome for you. It was inconsistent. Okay, inconsistent with what? Inconsistent with the way we distribute tablets. We have tablets that are about 300 short, tablets that could have gone to a person that did not break his tablet. Okay, what I'm asking, was it hard for you to go get him another tablet? I mean, you're the boss, right? It can be difficult. GTL is a private company. I'm the boss of Westville, not the president of GTL. What kind of freaking answer is that? That's one of somebody is just being difficult answering questions right now. They just don't want to answer questions. That's so evasive. In this case, was it hard for you to get him another tablet? It took a few days. Okay. Was the tablet in the prison? I believe so. All right. So physically, you had to walk to another unit and grab the tablet, right? Something like that. You have a lot of time to walk around the prison, don't you? I walk around the prison, yes. I mean, that's what you do when you're there, isn't it? Well, I do more than that, but yes, I do make rounds. And you said that you made accommodations for him to visit his family, right? Correct. Do you have regular visitation at the prison? Not for that unit. I'm sorry? Not for that unit. Yeah, well, but do you have regular visitation at the prison for general population? You actually have a building that's reserved for that, for general population. Okay, but it exists, right? You have people, inmates, and their families coming to see them for general population, correct? All right. And so, how many times a week do you have visitation? Every day. All right. And how long does that last? 1 hour. All right. So, 1 out of 24 hours a day, that room is consumed by people in general population and their families, right? Correct. So, it's not that much of a burden to use another 2 hours on one of those days, one time in eight, for a small month, for the small months he was there to accommodate him. I mean, you probably canceled up to 14 visits to accommodate him. Well, you could have just done it the hour after you had the regular visitation. Or we couldn't have done it at all. Okay, well, yeah, correct. You couldn't have accommodated him at all, right? Correct. So you made a small accommodation, which wasn't really a burden on you, was it? It was operations. Yeah, it took a little bit. Same people still working, right? Abnormal situation. Like, what is this answer? These answers are getting to me. I'm getting frustrated. All right, so Ms. Diener asked you about these guards, and your response was, is that they don't have to listen to their conversations, or the guards don't have to listen to Rick Allen's conversations, right? They're not directed to. No. But they are given a pen, right? The guards? Yeah. No. To write with. Who? The guards? Yeah. Ay, ay, ay. No. Well, the visitation room supervisor has a pen. Okay, it's just a log. Well, they had log sheets, the log sheets, right? Correct. On those sheets, they're writing down the things that he's saying in the cell, aren't they? I'm not aware of that during visitation. Have you ever looked at one of these log sheets that have been? I haven't looked at the visitation log sheet. I don't know what was written on visitation. I can't tell you if he was on self deletion watch at the time or not. Let me redirect because he was on it. So sorry. You finished? No, go ahead. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. Rosie says, "Let me redirect you to the guards that were standing at his door cell monitoring him, okay?" Sure. They had pens and paper? Correct. And that was given to them by the DOC? Correct. And they were writing down the things that he was saying? Correct. So they were naturally listening to him while they were writing those things down, right? They were a lot closer when they were in their cell. That's not an answer. Question. Right. What I'm saying is they had to be listening to what was being said, or they couldn't write it down. During when he was in his cell, yes, I thought we were talking about visitation. No. Oh, you said you chose 8 inmate companions specifically, approximately, I think you said to monitor Mr. Allen, right? Correct. Did you look at the background of any of those inmates and their personal packets to see what their history was before you did that? No, sir. Are you kidding me? What kind of stupid program is this? This warden is an idiot. Sorry, but I don't like to name call, but when I see dumb, I can't deal with it. He's being purposely evasive in his answers and shows his incompetence, if nothing else. All right, question. You have no idea if they were the most dishonest people on the planet, do you? I just know they came from the plus unit. And you also know that they were convicted felons? Correct. And you said that you know that inmates talk to each other, right? Correct. That's common knowledge, right? Right. Lots of snitching going on in the prison. A lot of communication, he says. So you knew that before you assigned any inmates to him, didn't you? Correct. But you did it anyway. I didn't make the assignment, but you just said you put 8 people on him. I limited how many people. I didn't make the assignment to put a companion on him. Okay, that came from mental health. Okay. Well, you could have talked to medical staff and said, hey, maybe we shouldn't use an inmate. Correct? I don't control medical staff, they're a separate entity. You're the boss, are you not? I am the boss. They're contractual. And I'm also not a doctor. Does it take a medical degree to assign somebody to a door cell to observe an inmate? It takes a mental health professional to put someone on self deletion watch. Okay, but does it take somebody with a medical degree to assign somebody to a door cell? I'm not sure. Oh boy, this guy is not smart. He says he's not sure. All right, cell door, he corrects himself. I wouldn't think so. No. Now he's saying I don't think you need a medical degree to do that. Ay, ay, ay. Do those companions have any mental health training? I believe they go through training, yes. And what's the extent of it? I'm not sure. That'd be a better question for Dr. Walla. So these log sheets were placed in a box, right? Correct. And the box was secured? Correct. And those sheets eventually made it to the internal affairs or Dr. Walla, depending on the circumstances, right? I don't recall any door sheets going to internal affairs, but they have gone to Dr. Walla. The video did, I'm sorry, the video could, but it was preserved by internal affairs. Well, it's preserved by the server, okay, which is at the direction or that internal affairs is in control of, right? They're not control of the server, but yeah, they would download it, okay? I'm not sure how long. They handled the manual side of that? Sure. And all of those items then were secured for central administration if necessary, right? If needed, yes. So there's a system in place at the prison in to secure all this information? Correct. And to process it? Sure. You were answering some questions about basically your daily visits with Rick when you first got there. You recall those answers? Yes. Or those general questions you were being asked? Yes. Rick was isolated really from any contact with any other inmates to be sure, right? They all are. And he's really isolated from any contact with certainly anybody from the public, right? They all are, sir. And yes, but I'm talking about Rick, sure. And he has very little contact with any guards, right? He had more contact than the rest of them. Than who? He had more contact than the other 254. Yeah, because when you took him to get a haircut, you had to assign 5 guards to him to get his haircut, right? Or when I assigned a guard to his cell 24/7. Right, right. But his contact with the outside world was extremely limited in the WCU, other than the tablets and phone calls and visitation. There was almost no social interaction available to him anywhere on that unit, is there? What do you mean? There's phone calls, there's visits available. They don't have the ability to associate with anybody, whether it be a group of other offenders, sit and play cards, anything. Not typically, no. So what do they do? Just sit in their cell all day? That's kind of the whole point of the unit, isn't it? Correct. So for somebody to be in that unit and to be chomping at the bit to talk to somebody at their door would not be unusual, would it? For the most part, there's not a lot of people standing by for conversations. I don't have any further questions. Ms. Diener, just a couple, your judge, and now recross. Questions by Diener. When you were asked about limiting his inmate companions to 8, did you pick the companions that were assigned? I did not. So you didn't select them by name or by criminal history, just by number. Wait, but he just said he didn't assign them, and now he's saying he assigned them by number. Oh, yeah, yeah, you're contradicting yourself. And so one of them didn't work out. Someone made a decision and replaced them with someone else? Correct. With access to socialization for someone in that unit, as Mr. Allen was, did all of them have mental health stop by twice a day to see if they needed anything? No. So there is a record that shows that a person stops by his cell twice a day from and fills out a restricted housing unit form. They can check a box as to whether he's fine or whether he wants services. Are you familiar with that form? Yes. And so is that you're telling me that's not happening with everyone in the union in the unit? No. He definitely got pulled more for mental health and medical. Okay. And when you said pulled, pulled, I don't know, as in asked if he needed anything or removed from his cell or removed from his cell. Okay. Yes. And that was the other thing I was going to get to. He had the opportunity almost every day to go to the medical room for his vitals. Is that correct? Correct. And that's not typical? No. Even for other people in a 107 cell in the other pods? No, unless they were on some sort of hunger strike where they needed to get vitals or a BMI. Yeah, it's not normal. Okay, and then he could be moved from his cell for showers and for rec, correct? Correct. What about his access to the chaplain? Upon request, if he wanted to have access to the chaplain, we would send her over there. And how often would the chaplain be on the unit, the A unit? The chaplains, I believe, go weekly. He gave me one specific request which I remember, which he wanted to see the chaplain, and I sent a chaplain over, I believe, that day. Okay, and then you said you walk the unit regularly? Correct. You were asked if the unit was a disciplinary unit, and you said it was also administrative, so you had people there that are being sanctioned, which you agreed with. Correct. What are the administrative placements? It'd be administrative placement if you're pending an investigation. I'm sorry, you could be placed, and several of them are placed in there for protective custody reasons. Several of them are placed there in isolation if they're on a hunger strike. We'll put them in an isolation cell so we can access their water intake or food intake so they're nowhere near another offender. So, again, A and B pod, so the judge understands A and B pods are long term segregated statewide offenders. C and D pods are Westville offenders, so they're not the worst of the worst in those pods. They're level 2 offenders and have committed a violation and are segregated to that unit. A and B pods filled with a variety of crimes, some statewide PCs, some sanctioned to a year, some sanctioned for 2 years. It all depends. Some have 1 year left in their term, some might have 60. It all depends on what you did to get there. Okay, so we're not talking about people who were there for a week. No. And when you're describing this, we're talking about pods A through D, correct. He's in A1 107, correct. So A and B are people from other facilities, correct. That are not placed in Westville from reception diagnostic, correct. They're typically level 3 or 4 offenders that would not be placed at Westville. Okay, in which pods? A and B. Okay, so he's in there with people who would not typically be a Westville inmate, correct. But they're there either for disciplinary reasons, affirmative response, or for administrative reasons, correct. And administrative reasons would be pending internal investigation or misconduct, or anything, could be pending trafficking, okay? Anything that internal affairs is looking into, but most of them are sanctioned to a fixed time to do in segregation. Okay, and then you said protective custody. Does Mr. Allen fall into that category? No. What is protective custody? Protective custody is an inmate that's in our facility that can't function out in population, whether he, testified in court against another inmate or just in fear for his safety or life. We'll run him just like in our HU unit. We have our own protective custody unit inside Westville as well. We've got, at the time, it was 28 beds. I think they've expanded it a little bit more, but they don't have access to the general population either. And they go to rec separately. They eat separately. Everything's done with that unit. So you were used to doing that, what you had to do for Mr. Allen, because you have people that are in a similar circumstance of protective custody where their own safety is at risk for being around other offenders. Yes. Okay. And then you said isolation because of hunger strike. Is that because you can keep a better eye on them in that, yes, area? Typically, we want to put them in a cell that doesn't have any water so we can realize how many ounces of fluid they're drinking. They're not around another offender, so they can't give them food that we don't know about just so we can monitor them. The senior says, "Okay, no other questions." The court says, "All right, thank you, sir, and you may step down." So that is the end of Part two, motion to suppress. So this is the motion to suppress all of his confessions, which now we know a little bit more about his conditions and what was going on regarding his visitations, the companions that were watching him constantly. So this is some good information to kind of know what was going on with Richard Allen when he was put on his self-deletion watch and all this other stuff. So it seems my hair bothering me. So good information, really good information in this. Now we know a lot more about his prison conditions and what was going on there in his solitary confinement area. It's scary that somebody could just be thrown in prison and left to waste away in a cell where um, things like this can happen. Eating his own feces and washing his face in the toilet. He was on uh, psychotropic drugs or whatever the term is. He was on Holodomor, which gives you hallucinations, and all these confessions were being made while he was on these drugs and while these things were happening. And these particular inmate companions were watching him and keeping track of everything that he was saying and doing. So it's really scary that this can be going on in 2024 in this day and age in America. It really seems third world country-ish, doesn't it? I mean, just very, very, very oppressive. And this is not how we should be treating our inmates, regardless of whether they are guilty or not, or have gone to trial or not. Especially if they haven't gone to trial, we should be treating them a little bit better because they are not convicted at that time. So it should is this case, Karen Reed, it has shown a huge light on what actually goes on in some of these states, some of these counties. It's really scary, and we need to keep our eyes open. So, thank you guys so much for reading along with me for this the final portion of the motion to suppress. In the next portions, we're going to go into the motion in limine. There's going to be multiple people testifying. That one might be multiple. It's definitely going to be multiple parts too. So be sure that you are subscribed, hit that like button, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks again for watching. Take care. Bye now.